welcome to DIY with Nancy. Hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to show you one of the most popular Portuguese pastries ever, and that is Portuguese Custard Tarts, Pastéis de Nata. I'm going to show you how to make the puff pastry as well as the custard. We're going to combine the two, and I'm going to show you how to make Pastéis de Nata step by step. Stay with me.
Okay, first we're going to start off by making the puff pastry. We're going to start off with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. To that I'm adding half a teaspoon of salt. Mix that together. And next I'm adding 3/4 cups of cold water. Mix that together until you form a sticky dough. Next I have here half a cup of all-purpose flour, and I'll be using this flour to flour my counter surface and the dough. Next I'm going to dust flour onto the dough, and I'm going to knead it with my hands for about 2 minutes. Now that I'm finished kneading, I'm going to let the dough rest for 15 minutes. Okay, next after the 15 minutes, I'm going to roll out my dough to a square shape, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Is I'm forming my square so that way when I'm rolling it out, I consistently have a square shape. You're using a rolling pin for this, and some flour to dust onto the rolling pin so that way the rolling pin doesn't get stuck to the dough. Now for me, it's always been, as I'm rolling it out, the circle shape comes out. So I use my hands to stretch out the dough to form the square shape. So feel free to use your hands. Okay, next we're going to start forming our puff pastry, and we're going to use 1¼ cups of unsalted butter at room temperature. So this is soft butter, and I'm using here a spatula to place the butter on the dough. Very important, as you're placing the butter on the dough, leave approximately 1.5 inches off the edges. Next, you're going to start folding your dough, and you're going to fold it halfway, or 3/4 of the way rather, and you'll see the edge has no butter. You're going to overlap it on top of the dough you just folded. Tap it and stretch it out. Again, always keeping in mind the square. Always remember to dust the counter space with flour to avoid the dough from sticking. I'm going to roll out the dough 3 times in total, and this is the second time, always keeping in mind that you want to keep the square shape of your dough. Next, I'm going to be placing butter for the second time on the dough, this time placing it on one side of the dough. So I'm placing the butter on my left side and your right side. Again, keeping 1.5 inches away from the edges. Next, I'm using a pastry scraper, and I'm going to place some flour on it just to help me lift the dough from the left side to the right, and I'm going to fold it in half, just like this. Again, keeping in mind the square. And I'm going to fold the other half and just compress it, hold it together. Next, I have here a baking tray with some flour that I've dusted on the tray. I'm placing the pastry dough onto the tray, and I'm chilling it in the refrigerator for 30 minutes. 30 minutes later, here is my puff pastry, and I'm ready to place my third layer of butter. Now I'm ready to place my third and final layer of butter. For the third and final layer of butter, you'll be placing it completely on the full square with the exception of leaving about an inch on all four edges. Next, I have 2 tablespoons of cold water, and I'm just placing it along the top and side edges. Next, I'm going to start rolling my dough, carefully just sealing it in the beginning and rolling it tightly to form a log. Next, you want to dust your log with some flour and place it on plastic wrap. I placed the dough in the refrigerator for 24 hours. Here's the dough I made the night before, and I've had it in the refrigerator for 24 hours. For the next step, I'm first going to flour my surface. Next, I'm using a paring knife, which I find it's really easy to cut this dough, and I'm cutting off the edges, which I won't be needing. Next, using my knife, I'll be cutting 1-inch rounds of the pastry log. The custard layers in here is what's going to make your custard tart flaky. I'll be using these cupcake tins for the custard tart, but you can easily use cupcake tins. Next, I'm placing each pastry round in the tins. Here I have 1/3 cup of cold water, and I'll be using my thumb to press the pastry down and up the sides to the very top to fit the tin. Next, I'm going to make the sugar syrup for the custard. In a small saucepan, I'm going to start off with 1/2 cup of water. And to that, I'm adding 3/4 cups of sugar. Give that a quick stir. Next, I'm adding a cinnamon stick and 1 lemon peel. Turn your stove on to medium heat and let the water and sugar come to a boil. Once your sugar syrup comes to a boil, turn off your stove, set it aside to let it cool. To start with the custard, in a medium-sized saucepan, I place 3 teaspoons of all-purpose flour. To that, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. Next, I have 1.5 cups of milk, but I'm only adding 3 tablespoons of milk first to mix with the cornstarch and flour. Once the flour and cornstarch is well combined, add the remaining 1.5 cups of milk. Constantly stir until the milk thickens and forms a custard. Once the sugar syrup has completely cooled, remove the cinnamon stick and lemon peel. Slowly add the sugar syrup to the custard and constantly stir. Once you've added the sugar syrup to the custard, next you will add 4 large egg yolks. Make sure your oven is on very low heat and keep stirring the eggs into the custard until it's well combined. The custard is now ready to be poured into the tins. Before placing the custard in the tins, preheat your oven to 450 degrees. Yes, I'm using a funnel. It's a little trick I learned and technique I learned when I was working at a bakery. So I've placed the custard in the funnel and filling it almost full and stopping it with my finger. So it's pouring into the shells without making a big mess. The custard tarts, Pastéis de Nata, are ready to go in the oven I have a dozen Pastéis de Nata, and I'm going to bake them at 450 degrees for about 10 to 12 minutes. Keep an eye on it.
Okay, everyone, that was my Pastéis de Nata recipe. This recipe makes a dozen Pastéis de Nata. Of course, if you want more, you can double up on the recipe, and I hope you enjoy the recipe. And if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, take care, everyone.